Martin Heidegger in Being and Time considers death not just as an endpoint where life ceases, but rather as a pervading existential event, the possibility of impossibility, of no longer being there, nicht mehr da sein können, as he puts it, that constantly presses upon each moment of life. The constant guarantee of the going under, stressed by Nietzsche, of every form, entity, and moment pervades life on an existential level, such that death, when grasped authentically, is a constantly motivating realization of the forwardly thrown nature of life. Forced to live ahead of itself, constantly in the future, anticipating, planning for, and adapting to its uncertainty, one is faced with a number of ambiguities which, given their proper existential analytic, as Heidegger calls it, can yield life-altering results. In order to explain death as an ever-pervading existential medium, as a symptom of the ontological structures of being and temporality that he discusses in Being and Time, Heidegger uses the example of a fruit. He says, when, for instance, a fruit is unripe, it goes towards its ripeness. In this process of ripening, that which the fruit is not yet is by no means pieced on as something not yet present at hand. The fruit brings itself to ripeness, and such a bringing of itself is a characteristic of its being as a fruit. Nothing imaginable which one might contribute to it would eliminate the unripeness of the fruit if this entity did not come to ripeness of its own accord. When we speak of the not yet of the unripeness, we do not have in view something else which stands outside, and which, with utter indifference to the fruit, might be present at hand in it and with it. What we have in view is the fruit itself in its specific kind of being. The sum which is not yet complete is, as something ready to hand, a matter of indifference as regards the remainder which is lacking and unready to hand, though, taken strictly, it can either be indifferent to that remainder nor not be indifferent to it. The ripening of the fruit, however, not only is not indifferent to its unripeness as something other than itself, but it is that unripeness as it ripens. The not yet has already been included in the very being of the fruit, not as some random characteristic, but as something constitutive. Correspondingly, as long as Dasein is, it too is already its not yet. That which makes up the lack of totality in Dasein, the constant ahead of itself, is neither something still outstanding in a summative togetherness, nor something which has not yet become accessible. It is a not yet which any Dasein, as the entity which it is, has to be. In other words, the constant progressive nature of our being is central to what it means to be a being in the first place. And Joyce in Finnegans Wake understands this death as anticipation structure, too. Utilizing the three main Viconian cycles of the divine, heroic, and civil, in addition to the short recurso, Joyce writes Finnegans Wake as a series of concentric and interpenetrating cycles. However, this chaotic fourth stage of the recurso, which returns us to the beginning of a new cycle, is actually ever-pervading in the book in much the same way death does life for Heidegger. Rather than acting as a teleologically fixed point in the future that will shoot us back to the beginning, like the top of Sisyphus's mountain, the recurso is an ever-present threat of dissolution and subsequent reconstitution anew that motivates the motion of Finnegans Wake. Not only is Finnegans Wake writ large a grand Viconian cycle consisting of 3 main chapters and a short 4th chapter, but it is filled with innumerable microcycles with their own continually recurrent encounters with the recurso as anticipated event. This very ubiquity of anticipation as a mode of change in Finnegans Wake prompts the ever-present battle with hermeneutics in the text, since it's constantly running into the necessity to create meaning, and then enacting a dissolution of the stable ground upon which we could form such meaning. Such anticipation also motivates the psychological complexity of the novel's preoccupation with the personal battle with guilt, universalized through allusions to Adam and Eve's fall in the Garden of Eden, Tim Finnegan's fall from the ladder, Humpty Dumpty's fall from the wall, etc. Through the constant struggle with the ambiguous crime in Phoenix Park, slowly elucidated and rumored throughout the book, and the anticipation of judgment, condemnation, shaming, and ostracization by HCE, we are constantly seeing HCE dig through his own grave by overcompensating. For example, when HCE is asked by the cat in the park what time it is, HCE's subconscious association of the location of Phoenix Park with the elusive crime causes him to become hyper-aware of and anticipate his own response and simultaneous appraisal by the cat, leading him to stutter his answer, thereby signaling that he was guilty all along. Thus, the reader is left at such a point that we are unaware A, what the crime is, B, exactly who was involved, and C, whether or not it even happened. The reader is forced to mimic HCE's petrification and alienation through this existentially anticipatory jig of call and response, question and answer. Jim LeBlanc, writing in an essay pulling on this Heideggerian thread further by examining the relationship of Sartre's theory of the gaze in Finnegans Wake, states that HCE guiltily denies an accusation against him that is never actually verbalized by the cat, whose literal question to HCE seems innocent enough. But like the peeping Tom discovered with his eye to the keyhole, the subject who perceives himself caught in the act of being by the gaze of the other is always put in the position of passing judgment on himself as an object, and realizes his objectness in shame. Thus, HCE, in a kind of preemptive effort to reassert his subjectivity, tries to disavow the original sin that is his upsurge in a world where there are others, which in Finnegans Wake manifests itself as the municipal sin business. HCE's rumored incautious partial exposure to the pair of dainty maidservants, whom he spies answering the call of Dame Nature in the rushy hollow of the same People's Park where he subsequently encounters the cat, who, as the other, steals the word from HCE through the former's look or gaze. This mode of existential anticipation is essential to what it means to be a human who, as a social being, is always faced with the fact that one must think ahead to fill in the gap of the future which is essentially outstanding, the not yet, as Heidegger calls it. We can then come to the realization that this open-endedness is the very condition of hermeneutics. Since hermeneutics is a process consisting of a circle, or more accurately a spiral, that reciprocally responds to its own past history and current goals, life, and therefore reading and interpreting texts, too, requires acknowledging the uncertainty of the future. And yet this is precisely what death means for Heidegger, stating, just as Dasein is already its not yet, and is its not yet constantly as long as it is already its end too. The ending which we have in view when we speak of death does not signify Dasein's being at an end, but a being towards the end of this entity. Death is a way to be, which Dasein takes over as soon as it is. As soon as man comes to life, he is at once old enough to die. This all illustrates the real underbelly of Heidegger's theory of death when we combine it with Joyce, since it shows the real difficulty of being truly authentic when faced with the inevitability of one's fall from vitality into nothingness, from potential into the resting neutral state of chaos and undifferentiation that threatens every organized body of matter. Therefore, through Joyce's complex aesthetics and formal inventiveness, Finnegans Wake itself testifies to and confronts the tenuous organization of every work of art, human life, or clump of earth. By examining these intersecting lines of meaning, reference, form, characterization, normativity, technique, affect, and more, Joyce allows the daring reader to, in a properly Heideggerian way, continually face death and, like a horror movie or horror video game, come out with a sense of catharsis and joy simply because one has escaped with one's life. That being said, that's it for this video. I hope it's been helpful in thinking about these concepts. Consider checking out any of my other lectures I've done on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other classic literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which you can tailor to your needs. I also have super thanks if you'd just like to donate one time to the channel, because it helps me out and takes some pressure off me, but no pressure either way. Care for yourself first. That's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in another one.